Question: what is and is not a hate crime in a protest? In outline, to successfully prosecute a protester for a hate crime in a protest, the following three-part test needs to be met. And for the purpose of this post, I'm going to be focusing on section 5 of the public order offence, which is the go-to offence for prosecuting protesters. Firstly, the police and prosecution need to prove that the protester committed a basic or substantive criminal offence. So for example, a section 5 public order offence says this: a person is guilty of an offence if he A. uses threatening or abusive words or behaviour or disorderly behaviour, or B. displays any writing, sign or other visible representation which is threatening or abusive within the hearing or sight of a person likely to be caused harassment, alarm or distress thereby. So for example, the protester could threaten or use abusive words at another person, including police officers, or a protester could hold up an abusive placard containing writing or images. Secondly, the police and prosecution would need to prove at the time of committing the offence, or immediately before or after doing so, the protester demonstrated towards the victim of the offence hostility based on the victim's membership or presumed membership of a racial group or religious group, or the disability of the victim, or sexual orientation of the victim, or transgender identity of the victim. Or the offence by the protester was motivated wholly or partly by hostility towards members of a racial group or religious group based on their membership of that group, and that could be hostility just to one member of the group, or a person who has a disability, or a person's sexual orientation, or a person's transgender identity. For example, if a protester held up a placard with a racial abusive imagery, this would demonstrate hostility which would aggravate a section 5 public order offence to a racially aggravated public order offence. Similarly, if the prosecution had evidence of a protester shouting anti-religious abuse, this would establish a hostile motive which would aggravate the section 5 public order to a religiously aggravated public order offence. And thirdly, the police and prosecution would need to prove the protester had no defence. Example of potential defences for a section 5 public order offence include the chant or the placard was not threatening or abusive, or there was no hostility by the protester towards the protected group. Interesting, the term hostility is not defined by law, and the defence that the protester's conduct was reasonable during the protest, that is, legitimate political comment and expression. What you find with hate crime laws as they apply to protests generally and section 5 public order offences specifically is this: how low the threshold is to commit a section 5 public order offence in a protest. How particular groups unhappy with the protest may feel particular chants and placards are threatening or abusive. How harassed or alarmed and distressed by a protest another person may feel, which is subjective. How it is the police, maybe from a complaint received, maybe from pressure from the government, who initially judges the words or chants spoken or placards shown as threatening and abusive, and or assessed and aggravated by a very wide definition given to particular forms of hate. How the context and conduct of the protesters' behaviour, words they spoke or chants, or the content of the protesters' placards is perceived by others, including the complainant, plays a deciding factor rather than the actual intention of the protester when dealing with a section 5 public order offence. And how undefined and to some extent open to interpretation terms in law like abusive or hostility seems to be. While there might be a core agreement on what is and is not acceptable or green and red light expressions in a protest, there are also amber light expressions, so to speak, where one person might see it as illegitimate harmful abuse and another person might see it as legitimate political comment. When it comes to protests, some argue that the way the law is written, giving wide discretion to the police and prosecution, are the benefits of hate crime laws in the UK to crack down on so-called hate-filled protesters and so-called hate marchers. That's why it's easy to classify conduct including chants or placards in a protest as hate crime by some commentators. It is also the case that other commentators see many criticisms of hate crime laws as they are understood and applied to particular protests, often the ones which are contrary to official policy. For them, they may see the use of hate crime laws as an attempt to silence legitimate dissent. If you are not sure about behaviour in a protest, like a chant or words and images on a placard in a protest, check with a friendly police officer or a specialist lawyer. And if you are a victim of hate crime, report it to the police. Feel free to comment, follow, like and share.